I was at a bar with a friend, and a seemingly nice normal dude approached me and asked to buy me a drink. He bought the drink and told me he'd come back later so we could chat. About an hour later, he came back over, and we had a pretty good normal get-to-know-you conversation. I said something to the effect of, I don't normally get hit on in bars, or something like that, and he says, don't worry, I'm into bigger girls. What the fudge? Why did he think that was okay? What do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Enjoy. Ladies, what is the worst thing a guy has done or said to ruin your good impression of him? Story 1. My friend's new boyfriend told both of us when we were hanging out that he'd like to go back in time to when she was 5 years old so he could intimacy molest her so that she'd be too damaged to ever sleep with anyone else besides him. He went into detail about how he would fudge her and how small her private area would have been, etc. She kept dating him. I don't even. Story 2. I fractured my skull in a car accident, age 18. As I was a poor college student, I didn't have a car to make the journey to the local hospital for scans to make sure I wasn't in the process of going full derp. My boyfriend had a car, though. He charged me $10 to take me to the hospital. Edit, spelling. Story 3. On our second date, he told me I would have to get my tattoos laser removed because they're disgusting on girls. When I asked about his very visible tattoo, he said that it was a memorial to the day his ex-girlfriend take down their unborn child. The date also included subtle homophobic remarks, asking me to move in with him, remember, second date, and threats to beat up both guys and me if he ever caught me physically touching another guy, even hugging. Story 4. We were eating at the park, and as we got up to leave, he had left his trash on the ground. I asked if he was going to pick it up, and he said, it's someone's job to clean here. I'm just giving them something to do. The trash can was literally 5 feet away. I ended up throwing it away. What a jerk. Answer. Life which you so nobly serve comes from destruction, disorder, and chaos. Now take this empty glass. Here it is, peaceful, serene, boring. But if it is destroyed, look at all these little things. So busy now. Notice how each one is useful. A lovely ballet ensues, so full of form and color. Now think about all those people that created them. Technicians, engineers, hundreds of people who will be able to feed their children tonight so those children can grow up big and strong and have little teeny children of their own, and so on and so forth, thus adding to the great chain of life. You see, Father, by causing a little destruction, I am in fact encouraging life. In reality, you and I are in the same business. The night will last forever. Story 5. First guy I ever had a crush on. I was about 14 and, oh God, I like this kid so much. And I was not subtle about it at all. He seemed to like me well enough back until he told my friend, I have girls throwing themselves at me all day. I walk into a store and people think I'm a model. Why would I date someone who's going to die soon? Story 6. There was a guy who I was interested in for a while until he showed me naked pictures and video his ex had taken for him while they were dating. She trusted you with these and now you're showing them to me of all people? Nope, the fudge out of there. Answer. When I was a freshman, one of the first weeks I got to school, I was walking around with my roommates at night when these two guys started chatting us up. One guy showed us something on his phone, which featured a nearly naked ex of his as a background. At that point, naive freshman ex-Donut X gave up and Troll X-Donuts took over. One of the guys was like, hey, guess what I have? And I said, herpes? Story 7. I hung out with a guy who I was considering dating. We were just walking around places and ended up in Chinatown. He proceeded to be extremely racist toward Chinese people after I asked if we could go eat some Chinese food. Chinese people eat dogs, they poisoned your food, etc., and then asked me to touch his arm muscles. When I said that I felt uncomfortable touching his arms, he grabbed my boobs and said, I feel fine doing that. Story 8. Whenever a guy starts meanie and moaning about an ex, or multiple exes, anyone with a dating history have shoot ex stories to tell, and I'm fine with sharing them further into the relationship if that's what we both want. But the first several dates are for getting to know each other, not each other's exes. Any person who goes on and on about an ex is either not over them, and I'm not interested in being a rebound, or they're an extremely bitter person. Turn off. Answer. Many people don't seem to understand that how they treat their ex is probably how they are going to treat their next partner after a breakup or maybe even sooner. What are they thinking? Oh, that was a total train wreck, but we're different. We'll last forever. Same thing with cheating. I'm cheating with you on my partner, but once we're an item, I'll stop cheating. Story 9. He asked me what I was studying in school. I replied astronomy and physics, and he immediately felt the need to tell me that all the funding for NASA should be taken and put into building more weapons. I suppose it was nice of him to tell me exactly what he thought of my future career so that I could avoid him from then on. Story 10. Overheard scene at the next table over at a restaurant. Obvious first date. Guy's cell phone rings. He answers it and holds up his finger to the girl in a 1-minute fashion. Proceeds to talk on the phone for a minute. She grabs her purse and leaves. Takes the guy a while to figure out she isn't coming back. Funniest thing I've seen in a while. Story 11. He got outrageously tipsy the first time he met my friends. Prior to this, he had been a very respectable and fun individual. As a result, he told one of my female friends that she was a whore and then picked a fight with her boyfriend over it. Nope. Edit. Oops. Typo. Answer. I was early in a relationship with a girl several years ago who did something similar, minus the whore calling and fighting. We'd gone out a couple times and she was coming to a get-together of some sort to meet a bunch of friends of mine. At like 2 p.m. on a Sunday, she shows up pissed tipsy, puked once or twice, and while she wasn't the only person there who was new to the group and meeting people, she was definitely the only one of about 15 who was tipsy. I felt like, great, now I'm the guy with the trashy chick the whole night. Whenever anyone would ask later, are still with that girl? And I'd say no. They'd nod, smile, and just say, yeah. Story 12. This hipster photographer guy I had known a few years through my circle of friends asked me out. He was a few years older than me and had always struck me as gentlemanlike, so I agreed. He took me with him to this really cool cathedral in the woods to take some artsy shots of the sunset, which would have been really romantic had he not turned into a total knob. Once we were about 15 minutes down the trail, he stopped, sat on a fallen tree, and insisted we make out, being overly touchy-feely, which I was not cool with yet since it was our first date, and I'm not a whorebag. He threw a temper tantrum because I wouldn't sit on his lap and told me to find my own way home. He stalked off, practically running, so I couldn't keep up, purposefully abandoning me in the forest to freak me out. There were several trails, and it was getting dark. I finally found my way back to the car in the dark about 45 minutes later, and he was just sitting in the driver's seat chuckling and said, "Ha, just kidding. I wasn't really gonna leave. What, are you mad? Date over. Take me home, you psycho." Answer. Almost same exact story here. Insisting we try and make out like 15 minutes into the date after awkward conversation. Throwing a tantrum over me not sitting on his lap so we can think about this moment later. Except through it all, my date was completely oblivious to how disinterested I was, even when I was fighting off his hands, telling me that we made a great couple, that he thought this was fate, that he could tell I liked him. It was crazy. Story 13. Talk incessantly about past girlfriends and how they were crazy and too much drama. Actually, no, not past girlfriends, because as he put it, I haven't had a girlfriend in 2 years. I mean, I've dated people, some for a few months, and they probably would have considered me their boyfriend, but I wasn't, whatever that means. Also classic, I had a pregnancy scare last year. I was dating this girl for a few months. We broke up, and a couple months later, I found out she was pregnant. It was like watching a countdown on Facebook. 9 months and 3 weeks after we broke up, she had the kid. Thank God I dodged that one. Basically, when you first start dating someone, steer clear of talking about your ex, especially if you don't have anything nice to say. Answer. I had a pregnancy scare last year. I was dating this girl for a few months. We broke up, and a couple months later, I found out she was pregnant. It was like watching a countdown on Facebook. 9 months and 3 weeks after we broke up, she had the kid. Thank God I dodged that one. So a normal gestation period is between 37 and 42 weeks, and since 42 weeks is 9.6 months, that kid could really be his. Story 14. He was a friend of mine. We were hanging out. He said, "I really like you. My ex was really hot, like way hotter than you, but you're the total package. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're absolutely beautiful." But my ex-GF was like, darn. So I mean, and I'd be like downgrading if I dated you, but not BC. She was a meanie, kicked him out of my house on the spot. Story 15. You seriously don't believe that there are aliens in the middle of the earth? Look at this internet picture on my monitor and tell me you don't believe that. How can you deny this? So you're saying that if you can't prove it, that it obviously isn't true. You've got a problem with your logic, girl, but don't worry, I'll help you with that. Story 16. I got to know this one guy over summer through a mutual friend of ours. I thought he was really nice and we liked a lot of the same stuff. It almost seemed too good to be true. So we were hanging out one day talking about past relationships, and he says, exact quote, "I think it's okay to cheat on your girlfriend because they're girls. Who cares, right?" I don't really talk to him that much anymore. Story 17. One of my male friends had just been left by his wife, and he spent a lot of time at my house to talk and vent. Nothing was going to happen between him and I, but he kept flirting and pushing the issue. Eventually, he let it go. Shortly after, he was around a group of my friends with me and said, "I have a hard time talking to women." I reminded him I was a girl, and his immediate response was, "Sorry, I have trouble talking to attractive women." Story 18. My mom just told me this story today. It happened to a neighbor of ours years ago. She was going on a date with a guy that she'd been into for a little while, and they stopped by his house under some pretense. This was pre-date, so not a natural progression towards kissing, makeouts, etc. He locked the door behind her and started to really weird her out. She realized he was planning to violation her and calmly put a blanket out on the floor, undressed from the waist down, and said, "Well, if you're going to go out into violation me, let's get this over with, because I've got to go to the police right after this and call everyone we know and ruin your reputation. So it's a busy night for me." He was thrown, but told her to take her top off. She said, "No, you don't need that part," and repeated that this needed to be quick because she wanted to get to the police straight away. When his resolve started to teeter, she told him what a great guy he was and that she knew he would never do something that awful, etc. He let her go and called her for a while to ask about going on another date. She did not go. Not an approach which I think would work in, well, just about any other situation, but I think it's fascinating that it worked for her. Story 19. Guy I used to be friends with spews a bunch of kitchen jokes, various uncreative offensive lines at a party. Oh, how witty. Bet you came up with those all by yourself. He also got partied too hard later in the night and fell into our host's TV, knocking it off the stand and breaking it. He didn't apologize at all, so there's another added sprinkle of douchebag right there. Needless to say, he lost a few friends that night. Story 20. On the second date, we were standing by my car as I was getting to leave. He proceeded to ask me a lengthy question, and as I was responding, he pulled my shirt away from my chest and looked straight at my boobs. I pushed him away and asked, "What do you think you're doing?" And he responded, "It's been long enough. I think it's time to see them." Didn't see him again after that. Story 21. Here are a couple of my choicer ones. On a first date, want to go out to the parking structure to look at the tapestry I'm sewing? It's in my van. I dislike my ex so much that when we broke up, I went back to the place I met her and peed on that very spot she first spoke to me. First date, and the guy gets to the spot where we are supposed to meet early and recruits a homeless guy to present me with an engraved trophy when I arrive. Story 22. I was on a second date with a guy once. He was really sweet, funny, intelligent, kind, handsome, etc. At the end of the evening, went in for a tiny goodnight kiss, and he grabbed me by the sides of my face and said, "Baby, I'm going to rock your world." I laughed a little, thinking he was just joking, but he was looking at me with bedroom eyes, all serious and shoot. I laughed so hard I started tearing up. He just got this sad look and walked away. I called after him to come back, but he just kept going. I felt bad for the guy, but I couldn't believe he used a line like that. If he'd kept being himself, he very well may have gotten laid. Lesson learned, I hope. Story 23. We first started talking to each other on OkCupid, and when we met up, I found out a lot of stuff he told me online was a lie. He said he loved all the same things I did, and he didn't. He also looked nothing like his profile picture. That was the worst part. I didn't mean to make a face when I first saw him, but wow. His profile picture must have been from when he was 18 or something. Story 24. There's been so many, but the most recent one was the guy who explained to me in depth how Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert were not funny. He also sent me a pic of himself, a middle-aged man, in a leather woman's catsuit with 5-inch stiletto boots and a leather hat, trying to pose artistically. Kink is one thing, but saying Stewart Colbert were never funny, no bueno. Story 25. Gave him head and he replied afterwards, "That's not what I expected it to feel like." In a not very enthused tone, I just did him a fudge favor by cleaning up his mess, so he didn't jizz all over himself. Show some appreciation. Twice before this, he came as shorts just from making out. Story 26. Was on a first date with a guy. Was asking general icebreaker questions. Asked if he had any pets. Mentioned he had a dog up until a week before the date, asked what had happened, and he said he just didn't want it anymore and had it put to sleep. After asking how old the dog was and whether or not it was sick or has any behavioral issues, he nonchalantly said, "Nope, just didn't really want it anymore." First, I wanted to know what fudge vet assisted him in take down an animal that was in perfect health and only 4 years old, and secondly, the date was fudge over. Story 27. I had a crush for most of my childhood on one boy, 8 years old, 16 years old. He thought of me as more of a kid sister, but still I was head over heels for him. When I was 16, I was sitting and reading a book. He came over to ask what I was doing. He told me the only time he read books was for class, and even then he only read the first page, last page, and back of the book cover. Bam! The bubble was burst. Story 28. Went to dinner with a guy that seemed pretty nice. Everything was going well until halfway through the meal, he starts asking me if I'm full and saying that I can't possibly finish my plate of pasta. I hadn't eaten all day, and regardless, it was delicious. I was eating it. I shrugged and said I was fine, but yes, starting to fill up a little. He takes my plate away, tells the waitress to box it, and goes, "Oh, if you're full, stop eating then." I was like, "Worry about your fudge self, douche." Story 29. I met him at work, and he invited me out to the movies. I'd never been on a date before, so I set up a group thing with me, him, and a couple friends since he was a stranger. After the movie, he asked to take a walk with me, and it had gone okay up until then, so I gladly did. He spent the whole walk telling me how he had deserted the military. He had a warrant out for his arrest. He had beat the shoot out of his stepfather for not giving him money, and he really wanted to have intimacy in the backseat of my car. It was like he was having a contest to see how badly he could present himself. I politely declined and went to my car. He followed me and jumped on my hood, begging me to let him crash at my place to avoid the cops. What? Story 30. Oh God, I have one of my own that I regret so hard. I was drinking this god-awful beverage and her glass was empty, so I asked her if she wanted some. She said something along the lines of, "I like you, Inoxp," not in a like way, and I reply with, "And I really like your short dresses." At the time, I thought it was pretty good. Now it's nothing but cringeville. Story 31. This comment has been overwritten by an open source script to protect this usurpa's privacy. If you would like to do the same, add the browser extension TamperMonkey for Chrome or GreaseMonkey for Firefox, and add this open source script. Then simply click on your username on Reddit, go to the comments tab, and hit the new overwrite button at the top. Story 32. For a little bit, I was using an online dating site. I was chatting with one guy, and we were making plans to meet up, have dinner, when he decided it would be a good time to send me a picture of his male body part. Such a turnoff. At least wait after a few dates. Story 33. This was my first year of college, and there was a power outage after a huge storm. The power supply at the dorms where we were staying was still working, but all of our power was being transferred to the university hospital, to save lives and all. So this guy, who had repeatedly been asking me out for a few weeks, complained to me how unfair it was that the hospital got all of our power. I mean, there are 18-year-old kids who need the light bulbs working. What the fudge kind of a narcissistic jerk thinks this? Granted, I wasn't really into him prior to this, but this confirmed in my mind that he was a little sociopathic. Story 34. Can I give two? First one was a guy that I had randomly met at a party and hit it off with. He was cute, nice, and we had awesome banter with each other. We texted back and forth for a few weeks, did the coffee thing, and then finally went on an official date. Date went really well. Finally is what pushed me off the fence into let's do this land. So when he asked if I wanted to go watch a movie at his place, and we all know what that means, I said yes. We get to his place, I use the restroom, and come back out to him, changed into dirty, holy sweats and cut-off t-shirt, sprawled on the couch watching a basketball game. In a boyfriend, this would be a non-issue, but on a first date, cue friend zone placement. Second guy was a friend of a friend in college who I got set up with. When we get to the restaurant, we are doing the getting to know each other chatty bit. So when the waitress comes around to take the order, I hadn't even had a chance to look at the menu. Before I can say anything though, the guy puts in his order, he'd been there before, I guess, hands her his menu and says, "You're not getting anything, right?" Was so blindsided I couldn't even respond, older and wiser now, so I just sat there the whole meal and watched him eat. Oh, and the final nail in that coffin was that the whole meal, he wouldn't stop talking about his hometown of Boston and was so god-darn judgmental and critical about anything that wasn't from there. I mean, I'm all for having pride in your home, but for Pete's sake, if you're on a date, don't heap the scorn and dislike on your date's bit of the world, and the rest of the world for that matter. Story 35. Guy was hanging out with me casually for a few months, then one day leaves me a note that essentially said, "I'm not going to keep being friends with you unless you put out, because it isn't worth it. I get to not put out and not have this jerk around anymore. There's no way I can lose." Story 36. Dude from work gave me a ride home. He starts telling me about his ex, and while he still seems a bit hung up on her, we were still pretty okay up to that point. Then the conversation shifts about women being irrational and the like. When I told him there was no way I would agree with that, he added meanie be crazy to lighten the mood, then commented how everyone says girls from our city are stuck up and hard to date. Yeah, never a big fan of generalizations. Some other dude also insulted my favorite hockey player goalie. Instant 3-2-3-2, 3-2-3-2. Story 37. Apathy. I went out with a man at university who I thought at first was cool and interesting because he claimed to like fantasy fiction as I did, was a wildlife photographer and played the violin in a band, but he did these things almost so carelessly that he had no passion at all. I think he actually did things just to tell people he did them. His eyes never showed any real emotion about anything, and he couldn't hold a conversation, even to discuss his supposed favorite book. I realized in the end the things he said he liked were his dad's interest. I met his dad. He was a genuinely cool man, and I was just going out with a very boring, soulless version of him. Story 38. Someone once told me, Lisa, the real reason I don't want my brother to meet you is that he would like you. Like, really, really like you. You see, he has a thing for girls that aren't particularly crazy beautiful. He likes average-looking pretty girls. And yes, this was a real conversation. Story 39. One that I did. My AF at the time and I were having intimacy, and we often like having a bit of a laugh during intimacy. She had a beautiful round jerk, but there were really, really faint stretch marks on it, and they made kind of a striped pattern. I actually thought it was really awesome because, hey, I'm Fudge a tiger. She was not so pleased with me saying as much out loud. Someone turning me off. I got a ride home from work once with a friend of a friend who was really cute and seemed nice the few times I had talked to her. As we were talking on the way home, everything I said she had a kind of meanie, whiny response to. Me, it's a beautiful day today. Her, it's too hot and bright. Me, man. Well, this beach is gorgeous. Her, looks gross. And this went on for the 25-minute ride with a few breaks. I've never met a more overtly negative and miserable person. Story 40. So my story is kind of reversed, but it still ruined my impression of this kid. I had been casually texting a guy in high school for a while, and it was clearly established that we liked each other. We liked all the same things, except that I didn't care for rap, and he loved it, got along well, blah, blah, when he stopped responding to me altogether. I thought this was odd because I thought things were going well. He was a close friend of someone I worked with, and I asked her what was up with him. She said, oh, he said that you were really cool, but he couldn't ever be with someone who didn't like Lil Wayne. Apparently that was his deal breaker. Story 41. A guy was trying to get me to make out with him all night. It wasn't the best situation for that, so I kept ignoring him and even pretended I finally fell asleep when he left the room. When he came back, he started kissing me. When I was freaking asleep, what a jerk. Story 42. I had been dating this guy for a couple weeks. Everything was going great. In 2009, my dad picked us both up and we watched the Super Bowl together. It was a grand old time. The next day, my dad got electrocuted at work and died. After I told him what happened, guy totally disappeared and I never heard from him again. Thank God for that. Fudge chicken shoot. Story 43. I was at a bar with a friend, and a seemingly nice, normal dude approached me and asked to buy me a drink. He bought the drink and told me he'd come back later so we could chat. About an hour later, he came back over, and we had a pretty good normal get-to-know-you conversation. I said something to the effect of, I don't normally get hit on in bars, or something like that, and he says, don't worry, I'm into bigger girls. What the fudge? Why did he think that was okay? Story 44. I went on a first date with a guy who was studying to be a nurse. He told me stories about how he would check off that the patients had their shower diaper or linen changed when they really hadn't. Said he disliked doing that stuff and continued to laugh about it. I chewed him out in the restaurant. Story 45. Met a guy through a friend on Halloween. We hit it off. Went on a first date. He took me to a fine dining restaurant, which I wasn't dressed for, so I immediately felt awkward. Nothing on the menu was under $20. I felt bad, so I ordered the $20 item, a Greek salad. Unfortunately, I dislike everything that came on the salad, so I picked around it. I asked him, trying to make conversation, to tell me something not many people know. He tells me that he loves dropping acid, and additionally, he loved popping zits because it's like opening a Christmas present. I don't even mind him liking popping zits, but the way he put it grossed me out. and I didn't feel like it was first date banter. Then he tried to force himself into my apartment. I had to shove his foot out of the door and lock it. So creepy. He called for 2 weeks. Edit, meant to add that he made me pay for my meal, so I'm glad I ordered a small. I was way too poor then. And FYI, I do not expect to have my meal paid for, but sort of do if you're bringing me to a fine dining establishment. Story 46. I had a guy I was dating ask me if I've ever kissed a girl. I said yes, and he asked if I had gone further. At this point, I revealed that I am bisexual and had been involved with a few girls. He was silent for 5 minutes, then stood up and left my apartment with no explanation. He called me the next day and asked me out again, saying he was willing to forget the events of the night before. I declined. Story 47. We became acquainted through mutual friends, but our relationship really blossomed when we had classes together. When he began leaving class early and/or not showing up altogether for weeks, I learned that he caught his girlfriend of 2 years cheating. He confided in me how upset he was. I gave him advice, and then he confessed the feelings he had for me from the moment we met. I told him I did not want to be his rebound, but I did feel there was something special between us. One day, he called me after another missed class to tell me in detail about the breakup intimacy he spent the last 10 hours having with his now ex. After that, I couldn't look at him the same way without thinking of all of the things they did. Story 48. A boyfriend of the time, a scientist. It's like you have all of something, then you put half of that on top of it. Me, you mean 150 of something? Him. Yeah, I just thought I had to dumb it down for you since you're just an artist. Every time I think about that moment, I wish I had jumped out of the moving car. Story 49. Didn't even know the guy, but he seemed nice. Met him on an app called Text Plus, and then he asked for private pictures. When I said no and asked why he thought I would so willingly do that, he told me because I was a whore. When I asked why, he said because I was white. Race has nothing to do with anything, and it really pisses me off when people all of a sudden change their mind about you when they know you're of a different race. Story 50. I once started dating a guy who I'd known for a while and seemed really nice. Then a few weeks into the relationship, I noticed that he was really passionate about some certain political issues. That would be fine except for 2 things. 1, he would not shut the fudge up about them. And 2, he expected me to be equally passionate about them and dismissed the issues I was passionate about as unfixable or not really an issue. So basically, he didn't give a shoot about my opinions. He just expected me to care about what he said I should care about, to the point where he told me that my dreams of going to help fight intimacy slavery in Southeast Asia were stupid. Fudge that, I got out of there. TLDR. Don't belittle her opinions or passions, even if you might not entirely agree with them. Still TLDR, don't be a male body part. Story 51. My SO's older brother threw a house party. Didn't really fit in all that well, seeing that he just graduated college and was the typical frat type, and we were the only ones there that were tattooed and pierced. Had a great time, met all of his new friends, and were drinking quite a bit. One of these new friends shows up, sees me in the corner, blares Breaking Benjamin or some shoot, and starts headbanging. Asks if I really want to party, and yeah, bleg. Story 52. I went to my friend's apartment for his birthday party and met a friend of his. Let's call him Bob. I talked to Bob on and off in a group setting throughout the night, and he seemed like a nice guy. Around 3 or 4 in the morning, most everyone had passed out or fallen asleep, and I was watching Army of Darkness in the living room, sober, snacking, having a good time by myself. Bob walks in and asks to join me. Sure, no big deal. We talk and laugh at the movie. Bob then suddenly flings himself on top of me and tries to kiss me while talking dirty at the same time. I jumped off the couch immediately, and he kept trying to talk dirty to me. He was acting so ridiculous that I just started laughing at him, walked outside to my car, and went home. I actually thought Bob was a swell guy before he did that. Shoot happens. The next day, I was in a cafeteria on campus eating some dinner with a male classmate. Bob walks by with his food, sees me with another guy, picks up his little milk carton and throws it at our table. He stomps off and I start cracking up. My classmate was very confused, so I explained the situation and we both laugh. Later that night, I asked my friend what was up with this guy, and he said he wasn't sure. But according to him, Bob apparently went down a girl we knew earlier that night. She had chlamydia at the time. Dodged a motherfucking bullet. Story 53. So I'd been out on a few dates with a guy whom I could tell was really frugal. I thought that was very cool, actually. The industry in which we both work has a lot of people who are obsessed with money and status symbols, and I'm not a fan of that. However, I quickly saw that he took frugality to such an extreme that it more closely resembled a hoarding-style problem than a good financial practice or a rejection of consumerism. The time we hung out and he consumed food that had expired 5 years ago was the final straw for me. Story 54. I was in Vancouver, Canada for a girls' weekend. I'm from Seattle, and we were walking along the streets when we started talking to some cute boys. As I was flirting with one of them, I made a joke about Justin Bieber, and the guy told me he lost all respect for me. He then told me the only way I could get it back would be to give him a blowjob. I just walked away from him immediately. Story 55. Driving along in the car, stopped at a red light. Colored fellow walks on the sidewalk a lane away. Date rushes to lock the car doors. Then at the restaurant, he was rude to the waitress, which confirmed that he was not a nice person. Not a horror story to be sure, but I'm glad I don't have any of those. Story 56. My very sweet but uptight boyfriend at the time called me to meanie about his college finals. My house had burned down 2 days before, my family living with my aunt as we had no house, and I was devastated because I had lost my pets and everything I had ever owned, although luckily my family was fine. He also didn't understand why I didn't give a shoot about his stupid fudge final stress. I broke up with him shortly after. Story 57. Someday I'm going to find a woman who is awful to everybody. Then I'll take that woman out on a date and treat her like she treats everybody else. And by the end of the date, either she's fallen for me because I'm like her, or she'll dislike me and ask why I did this. And then I tell her, "What? Don't you recognize yourself?" And then she'll turn into a good person and I'll have bettered the world once again. Story 58. Had been in a tumultuous relationship with this charmer for about 2 years. I'm a stress eater, and during our relationship, I put on 25 films. One day he was laying on the couch and I sat down next to him and sort of leaned over him. I was wearing a t-shirt. He reaches up, jiggles my bicep fat, which he knew I was terribly embarrassed about, and said, "It's a shame about this fat. You'd be so pretty otherwise." Cried my little heart out for about an hour, and that sentence started our for-real breakup. Jerk. I'm pissed again thinking of this. Dar, I'd be pretty if I wasn't so fat. Edit. Just remembered an even worse one. Reddit, you've got me all riled up. Different ex picks me up at my house. Him. "Hey, babe, where do you want to go today?" Me. "Oh, I don't, but I need to go to the pharmacy for tampons or pads." Him. "Get tampons. I don't want my cunt getting smelly." Story 59. I went through a ton of bullying when I was younger. Back in high school, I was riding in my ex's parents' car. Don't even remember where we were going. His mother and father started talking about my mother and completely bashing her. My mother is an educator. A lot of students have had her and dislike her teaching methods. My ex was one of them, and apparently his parents didn't like her either. They called her a rotting cunt and all this horrible stuff I would have never thought they would ever say, much less in front of her daughter. And my ex just let them spew their shoot, never lifted a finger to defend me or my family. We never had sexy time again, and we broke up soon after. I'm done with bullying like that. My ex's parents insulted my mother, and my ex did nothing to stop it. Story 60. A guy I had previously hooked up with, but had absolutely no intention of doing it again because it was awful, sent me a text one day that just said fudge. I was like, "Is that a question?" To which he replied, "Yeah, want to?" So I said that was probably the most disgusting way I have ever been asked to have intimacy, and asked him if it actually had worked for him before. He said yes. I want to know what dumb meanie actually went for that OO. Story 61. Would you like to make this meanie Facebook awful? It would really help me out if you said yes. My parents give me more money when I'm dating, and I want to save up enough money to buy a handgun. Needless to say, got the hell away from crazy. CPS actually got him for having a rifle on campus a few months later to scary shoot. Story 62. I was standing in line for sandwiches at the mall food court when I was approached by a pretty attractive guy. Unfortunately, as soon as he opened his mouth, that went out the window. What he said, "Hey ladies, my friend thinks you're really cute but doesn't have the balls to say anything." It's funny because we're Marines and have the balls to be shot at, but no balls to talk to a girl. So I figured I have the balls and I'd come over and tell you what he doesn't have the balls to tell you. And this continued on and on for longer than I wanted. What I heard, balls, 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 balls. Story 63. This guy I had been interested in dating turned around and said, "Any girl who has had intimacy with more than 5 guys is a whore." He at the time had intimacy with at least 10 girls. He knew I had been a party girl and had slept with around the same amount of guys. He later had the audacity to try and sleep with me at a party. I told him he'd be putting me over my whore count and he should go find a virgin to fudge. Story 64. One guy was a raging Republican. I don't mind that, but shoving your beliefs down my throat is not cool. Also, dudes that are overly intimacy. My current boyfriend has a terrible habit of putting my hand by his crotch each time we get in the car. I mean, I like you and stuff, but can we just have one normal car ride? Story 65. We were eating at a restaurant, and I had ordered either a burger or some kind of club sandwich. I had my elbows resting along the bottom of the table ledge, but not on the table. The guy looked me dead in the eye and said, "Did your parents not teach you to keep your elbows off the table?" I just blinked at him. It was a first date, and it was just such a bizarre thing to say. Story 66. Made one of the stereotypical comments you'd find on Reddit against women. We had a date scheduled for a few days later. I canceled it immediately and didn't speak to him again. I'm all for sexist jokes from both men and women against men and women. If you're someone I'm close with, and if I can tell your intentions behind it, if you're not and you make one, fudge you. Story 67. Not that big a deal, but there was a guy I was interested in getting to know, but he only contacted me when he was high or tipsy or just horny. I mean, I wouldn't have turned down a fudge if he genuinely liked me, and not in a romantic way either. And I wasn't just a hole to him. Then there was the guy I would have gotten involved with if he hadn't turned out to be a borderline psychotic cokehead. We were majorly hitting off, talking on the phone all the time. Then one night we're having one of those long conversations, and he keeps drifting off into these really creepy segues about eliminate people and hurting me. So I was like, eesh. No, haven't talked to him since. Story 68. Trashed his ex. I don't care how bad your breakup was. If the other person isn't there to defend themselves, you keep that shoot to yourself because it makes you look like you still have unresolved issues. Unless we're already in a relationship, and I'd like to learn more about your past. Story 69. My ex's friend decides to try to pursue me the week after me, and the ex broke up. I didn't think of him like that, and during that time, he tells me about how he likes to get tipsy, party, and goes into detail about his intimacy adventures. Oh, and he also talked about his roommate's intimacy experiences too. Story 70. After a decent first date, I went on a second date. The guy took me to a restaurant, and things weren't looking good. The guy totally took me off guard by talking rudely to me, and he started treating the waitress poorly. I apologized to her. I told him he was being rude and he would snap off some lame excuse. Never saw him again. Later on, I found out from someone who worked the same night at the same restaurant that the waitress felt sorry for me. I told them I felt sorry for the waitress, and this person said with a smile, "Oh, the waiting staff can take care of themselves." I asked if anything was done to his food. The response was probably. TLDR went on date with rude guy who treated waitress poorly. He most likely got snot in his food. Story 71. All right, so I just read a lot of these. I am left with one question and one question's only. What is so attractive about these jerk guys that makes girls want to go out with them in the first place? There must be some warning signs you can look for while talking to them to know if they are assholes or not, coming from a very polite and sociable male. Story 72. Him. I got into a fight today. Me. What? Why? What happened? Him. I beat up this faggot on the bus. Me. Why? What did he do? Him. Oh, nothing. I just really dislike gay people. Me. I need to pee. I'll be right back. I asked my best friend to tell him I was sick and kick him out. Story 73. I once dated a guy who was an adorable genius with no sense of social protocol. He'd constantly wake me up in the middle of the night for numerous reasons, like he felt I was being distant, WTF, I'm sleeping, or to fool around. One night he woke me up to tell me he was constipated. I shot straight up, looked him in the eye, and told him I couldn't see him anymore. No one screws with my sleep. Story 74. Became friends with a guy in physics. He was my first university friend, and it was awesome. He was smart and funny. Then I started dating someone, and he became crazy and aggressive, always talking bad about the guy I was dating and trying to convince me to break up with him, punching me in the shoulder, touching my neck or my face, calling me all the time. I hung out with him still because I thought he would get over it. Last time I saw him, he was in town on break from grad school. He tried to kiss me, and I pushed him away and said, "What the fudge?" So he tried to climb on top of me and pull off my shirt. He still texts and calls me when he's in town. No thanks, junior rapist. Story 75. One night I had bent over backwards to help and basically do everything for this guy. He had a lot of housework and work around the town that I basically did myself that I liked, so we would have time to hang out. I had done a lot of work that day, including my own, while he sat at home doing probably nothing. Really don't know why I did this. Just really wanted to see him, I guess. So when I go over to his house later, we finally sit down with a movie. He looks at me with a smile and asks, "How about a massage?" Assuming he meant me, since I had gone out of my way for him all day, I say sure. Then he proceeds to turn around so I can give him one. I just went with it, figuring he would give me one in return. After, he shoved the empty bowl of popcorn at me and asked for more. I just left. Story 76. This younger guy and I went out a couple of times. On the third, fourth evening, he messages me asking if he should pick up a pill for me if we were going to do it. I MSG back, saying if he wanted to take it to the next level, he should pick up the condoms. He replies saying he has a problem with condoms and is scared that I want to get pregnant with his kid. Weirdest message string ever. Never messaged or got in touch with him again. Story 77. A guy started working at the gas station I go to every day to buy smokes. I think, darn, he's cute and seems really sweet. He'd say how nice it was to see me, ask about my day, etc. I wear a lot of low-cut shirts, so I caught him staring at my chest many times. This doesn't bother me. I like my boobs. So sometimes I show them off, and I understand that because of this, guys are going to look. What totally ruined my perception of him, however, was when he started to comment on the girls. He'd say things like, "Darn, you have awesome boobs. I can't even look you in the eyes." Or, "I would eliminate to see your tits." Guys, as someone who likes her boobs and therefore doesn't hide them, I know you're going to look, and I'm fine with it. But please don't fudge talk to me about them, especially if I don't even know you. It doesn't turn me on. It doesn't make me think about sleeping with you. It doesn't have any positive effects at all. It makes me realize that you're a creep and want nothing to do with you, besides maybe slap you for presuming that I'm a slut because I like my breasts. TLPDR. Just because I'm wearing a low-cut shirt doesn't mean you can tell me you want to play with my boobs. Story 78. Went to the mall to meet him for a date. After the first 10 minutes, which we spent smoking outside and chatting lightly, we went inside. Then he sat, pulled out his laptop, and started playing COD. Completely ignored me for the next half hour until I stood up, said goodbye, and left. Story 79. He was rude to his mom. I was on a second date with a grown jerk man. Him mom called to remind him about something benign, and he spoke to her like a rude 15-year-old brat. Solid general rule. If a man doesn't speak respectfully to his own mother, it's only a matter of time before he speaks that way to you too. The converse is also true if a girl is rude to her dad. Story 80. Two different guys didn't stop trying to flirt with, convinced me to have intimacy with them after I had turned them down. This one guy was guilt-tripping me and sending me smiley faces every day, so I had to block him. I was with the next guy for a little bit as an FWB sort of thing, but I got a boyfriend after we hadn't hung out for a while. He started trying to make me feel bad by saying all the stuff he wanted to do with me over the break and how he had planned for both of us, and he was double-checking that I didn't want to have intimacy with him after he knew about my boyfriend. He also asked if he or my BF was bigger, as in male body part size. I told him that's not indicative of anything else, and he told me he wasn't that shallow, but he was shallow enough to want to know if my new guy was bigger. WTF. Story 81. I was talking to this guy who worked a car lot. He was a very good salesman and great at dealing with people. Well, he called me one day and told me to get dressed. Nice, he had a surprise for me, and we were going out to eat. Right. This fudge guy shows up in a new car. A 1989 Honda Civic with something god-awful on the seat that was a mix between a melted plastic bucket and mold on the passenger seat. I sat in the back. So on the way to go out to eat, I'm thinking, the worst has to be over. Yeah, right. We pull up goddamn Burger King. Trying to keep my composure, we go in. He turns to me. "Go ahead, baby. You can have whatever you want. It's on me today." I promptly called my friend who lived less than 5 minutes away, told him I had to go to the bathroom and snuck out the side door. I haven't talked to him since. I don't think it would have been so bad if he had not asked me to dress nice and acted like this was a big treat for him to take me to Burger King. Story 82. On a night out with a bunch of mates, a guy said, "My mom would be so proud of me out with blacks and queers. Bye-bye." Also, a guy tried to convince me he was serious about me by telling me he wouldn't be willing to cheat on his GF for anyone. What a charmer. Also at a party once, some guy corrected everything I said, even opinions he gave alternative ones, or facts he insisted were wrong even when others backed me up. Don't know what his problem was, thought he disliked me. Then he called a week later and asked me out. Nope. Story 83. was talking to a potentially date-worthy guy, made some completely disgusting homophobic remarks, and continued to, even after I informed him that I have had many gay friends and relatives and am an active straight ally in our school's transgender support group. Lesbians are awesome, though. At least they do something good for the world. Story 84. This was a guy I had known for a few years and had the biggest crush on. We were just starting to date, and we were at his apartment drinking a little bit, talking, etc. Out of the blue, he starts telling me this story about how he had found a dead cat and wanted to keep its skeleton, so he tried to burn and boil the skin and everything off of it. The story was bad enough, but the look he got in his eyes while talking about it was what freaked me the fudge out. Needless to say, that was our last date. Story 85. Was sitting with a guy, just friends, and he starts rambling about girls who got pregnant as teens and how he finds it unattractive when a woman doesn't work out to get herself looking great after having a baby. He actually talked about 2 examples from high school. One girl who just let herself go, in his opinion, and this other girl that he considered hot because she worked out after having her baby. Story 86. This guy took me home from a party. I thought it was just a ride, but he asked to come inside and stay. I was a freshman living in a dorm. So I told him that since my roommate and I have single beds and we essentially share a closet-sized room, we don't have boys stay over out of respect for each other, so on. He said I was lying and proceeded to call my roommate. We were in the same sorority, he know us both, to check my story. WTF. Thankfully, she didn't answer. However, I left my student ID in his car, which you need to get into dorms past 1 a.m. When I realized this, I called him and he said, too bad. Story 87. My freshman year at college, I met this new guy in the dorms who transferred in during the second semester and didn't know anyone. I introduced him to all my friends, trying to be nice, and we hung out a couple times, but mostly we just talked online. He always seemed like he was flirting with me, and he was kind of egotistical. So he probably thought I was being nice to him because I was interested in him. Anyway, one day while we were talking online, we got onto the topic of people peeing their pants, and I confided in him this story about accidentally peeing my pants at school when I was like 8. I initially didn't want to tell the story, but he coaxed me into doing it, and from then on he consistently called me stupid names like Ms. Pee-Pee Pants. If it had been once or twice, that's kind of dumb, but we're talking months. I even asked him and then told him to stop calling me that, and he didn't. Our friendship pretty much ended after that because I stopped answering his IMs and texts. Story 88. I went on a first date with a guy. He was several years older than me, and we were going to go to the movies. Well, he comes and picks me up from my house wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt with sneakers. I couldn't believe it. I went on the date. I don't even remember what we saw, but I do remember that impression he made. I never called him or saw him again. Story 89. I was once on a date with someone who decided to throw all his trash on the ground after eating. When I complained about it, he, in a serious tone, explained the fact that he had just littered by saying, "That's why they have people who pick these things up. It gives them a bone and something to do." Story 90. This was a first date with a guy. Met him at school where I waited 2 hours for him to finish a study group. Then he invited me back to his place where he demanded I make him pizza. No, I didn't. Then he fell asleep with his butt practically in my face while his roommates talked to me about stupid things, and I suffered through the movie Silent Hill. 6 years later, I was long gone. He texted asking if I could bring food when I came back. Never responded, never went back. Dude was a scumbag, Steve from minute 1. Story 91. This guy that I thought I could maybe have a thing for invited me to the movies one day. Hadn't known him but a few weeks. I was really upset because I was busy and couldn't go. He acted all disappointed and crushed. Then the next day, one of my best friends comes over and tells me that she went to the movies with him, only knowing him because I introduced them a few days before. I hadn't said anything about him to my friend, and seconds after the movie started, he shoved her head down to give him a blowjob, and she did, then had to leave early and left her without a ride home. I've always wondered if he would have pulled that shoot with me if I had gone. Obviously, I was done with him after that. Story 92. Actually, the worst was this guy I had just met at a bar. Rihanna's SM was playing in the background, and I mouthed to him, "Chains and whips excite me," trying to be all sexy because I was tipsy as fudge. He said, "I have chains and whips at home and a leather mask that I'll wear while I violation fudge you. Does that excite you?" I called a cab literally 10 minutes later. Story 93. Was talking to a guy. Within the first 15 minutes, he starts going into intimacy and what he likes and what he wants to do with me. I told him I was uncomfortable with his forwardness and was a trauma victim. He continued, "I don't care if he cures cancers and lives in poverty to give all his money to orphans and kittens. Never in my life." Story 94. I am going to leave out huge chunks of the story, but here goes. Guy I am not in a relationship with asked me not to tell him if I have intimacy with someone else while he still tells me about how he is having intimacy with multiple other females. I do as he asks, even when I was never telling him anything, unless he asked me about it anyway. A couple of weeks later, this topic comes up again. I am honest with him about how I did in fact have intimacy with someone, and his response is, "So you lied." Well, it's okay, I kind of lied to you too. I had intimacy with 2 other chicks right before I came here because they were willing. He had a really hard time understanding why I did not want to have anything to do with him. There were several other things as well, but I don't feel like turning this into a longer post. Ooh, Dr. Insane Jealousy that is completely unjustified, while fudge half a dozen other chicks and telling me about it in detail, thinking this will make me want to have intimacy with him. Story 95. I brought a shy, sheltered religious female friend with me to a party last summer. An old friend of mine from high school apparently took one look at her and decided that even though he had a girlfriend who had just moved in with him, he had to have her. I left my phone on the counter for about 5 minutes at some point. During that time, he went through my phone, got her number. Throughout the evening, he repeatedly came on to her both through text and in person and would not take her polite no thank yous for an answer. He delved into full creep mode and started telling how perfect her tits were, how once he somehow found out she was a virgin, determined he was to be her first for everything, and finally how he'd be there when she woke up in the night. The whole time she was turning him down and asking him to stop. Finally, after he slid a hand on her crotch, she got up from the table and tearfully asked me to take her home. I was too tipsy to drive, but called a cab for us, and during the drive, she showed the text conversations. Needless to say, I was furious. When I called to verbally eviscerate him the next day, all he could say for himself was, "It was the plant substance, man," and I guess I was just scared about spending the rest of my life with new girlfriend. Maybe worth mentioning that while he was going on 23, this girl he was going to spend his life with had just turned 15. So yeah, have not had anything to do with him since. Story 96. Cuddling up with my boyfriend, and as we're looking into each other's eyes, he whispers, "My God, your eyes are beautiful. I just want to rip them out, stick them in my freezer, and you see them as marbles." Didn't ruin my impression of him, but most certainly ruined the moment. Story 97. I was a freshman in college at a school in the middle of nowhere. It was everything stereotypical that you would expect from a backwoods, towny hick town. A guy in my dorm had introduced me to his friend Robbie. He was a local in the area and was really nice and definitely my type. Come Valentine's Day, Robbie asked me to be his Valentine, and his cousin, Matt, invited out my friend Katie. We thought it was perfect, actually having plans for Valentine's Day, and it would be a double date so things won't be as awkward. Fast forward to Valentine's Day. Robbie and Matt pick us up in this beat-up car. The door of the car was held up with a bungee cord, and the window didn't shut all the way. Mind you, we're in upstate New York, so February is freezing. They bring us a flower and this perfume that I swear to God was from the dollar store. But I let it go. The kid was sweet, and it's the thought that counts. So I got in the car and put a smile on the face. The second we started driving, I immediately feared for my life. Matt went about 100 miles an hour up these one-way dirt roads, while the door rattled and the inside was a wind tunnel. Katie looked back at me from the front seat. We both could not even deal. So we get to the restaurant finally. It's literally in the middle of nowhere, and I have no idea where we are at all. In the middle of the restaurant was a fireplace. Robbie and Matt, I guess, had this planned that we would separate, and Robbie and I would go to one side of the fireplace, and Matt and Katie would go on the other. We were dreading this, but hey, maybe it would turn out better than we thought. Art of positive thinking, right? The beginning of the date was okay, I guess. A little